What's up, guys? Seth here again. Another episode of Late Night Ties. Today we're doing a damselfly pattern I'm kind of messing around with. Real fun pattern for mid to late summer. Big dry fly eats from trout and the grayling that we have up here in Montana. So yeah, so I'm cracking a few of these Kettle House beers. So crack one open and let's get into it. Alright guys, so like I was saying, they were tying up a damselfly pattern. Pretty fun fly for the mid to late summer when those damselflies start poking out. We'll start with just a thread base, and then I've got some dyed blue deer hair stacked up here. Take that out. This is going to be for the tail. Measure out a good sized tail there. Go ahead and tie it in. Alrighty. I like to try and clean up these butt ends right away. Just get them out of the way. Pretty fun pattern to tie. I like using deer hair for the tail. You could definitely use foam. I don't really like using foam on my flies. It's kind of like part of the allure of fly fishing to me, which is pretty hypocritical, is that, you know, it's supposed to be a little bit more natural way of fishing, and so if I'm gonna be throwing a bunch of foam out there, then almost feels like I should be throwing a Rapala. But I just feel like I've found so many foam flies sitting on the river that have probably been there for at least a few years, that losing a foam fly out there feels a lot more like littering than when you lose a fly made of more natural materials. But like I was saying, I'm kind of hypocritical because at the same time I use UV resin on just about every fly I tie. So here what I'm doing is I have this hair coming off the back, and I'm just spiraling up it, kind of tying it up in a bundle until I get to the end. Makes a real buoyant tail. Just because all this deer hair is just, you know, hollow and extremely buoyant. Once I get to the end, I'll just give her a couple wraps in that same spot before I start working my way back down. Eventually I'll get all the way back down to the body. And then you can just get your thread going back on the shank. I think it's kind of a cool looking tail in that it's skinny like a damselfly tail would be. I feel like a lot of these foam tails people tie up tend to be a little bit bulkier than an actual damselfly would be. And then when you use black thread, I feel like you get that segmentation that the naturals have with the blue tail with the black bars. I think it ends up being a pretty cool looking fly. So what I can do now to kind of strengthen this tail up, because it is just really delicate deer hair, is I'll put a stripe of UV resin across the top, and that'll kind of adhere all that thread in place, and then just kind of strengthen up that deer hair. Alrighty, now that's done, we move on to the body. This body gonna have more deer hair. They'll be kind of draped over the back like a wing case almost on a nymph. Now for this, I'm not going to stack the hair because I like using the most buoyant parts of the feather, or the hair for this. The whole point is getting a really buoyant fly, or as buoyant as you can. And so I'll tie it in by those tips. Just like that. Alrighty. Now those can just be kind of left back there for now. So now I get to about the 1/3 mark of the shank of the hook, and I'll start with my wing. And now what I use for the wing on this is some white EP fibers. Now, a normal damselfly, when you see them landed, they always have their wings kind of cupped backwards over their tail. And I have to admit, I've never actually seen a damselfly stuck in the surface. But I imagine if there was one, it probably would be a little bit more agitated and not have those wings cut back. It'd probably have them out to the sides, trying to flare and get itself off of the water. But like I said, I have no actual proof of that. I've never seen it. So, just for the case of making a buoyant fly, I tie them directly out. So I tie them in just doing X wraps around them, similar to how you would tie in lead eyes on any fly that does that, that has that. Once I have it tied in adequately, I'll pull it off to the side. Just give it a snip. That's not going to be the final length, but it'll be good enough for now. Now, for the rest of the body, I'm going to be using this light blue superfine dub. I believe this is some Semperfly. It doesn't have the, it actually doesn't have the label on it. I'm not sure what happened, but ultrafine blue dry fly dub. Get that dubbed on there. Now this fly, like I was saying before, it's a great late summer still water fly. I've seen damsels at my local rivers flying around, but in my experience, I tend to see a lot more of them when I'm fishing still waters, and more in the late summer is typical for me seeing them. So yeah, I've never used this fly on a river or a stream. I'm sure it'd probably work just as well as it does, but this, to be honest, this tends to be a fly I use in bodies of water when the fish are more opportunistic. Like case in point, typically I'll use these in the high mountain ponds or lakes, I guess, that typically are anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000 feet of elevation, is where I'll fish this fly a lot. One of my more successful trips with this fly was towards I think it was about the middle of September. I hiked up to a mountain lake that's got a bunch of grayling in it, and I was pretty successful there with this one. Grayling have a little bit smaller mouth, so there's a lot of them going after it but not quite getting it all in their mouth, lots of misses. But when you're fishing a big fly like this, all the beats tend to be pretty aggressive, and so that makes for some pretty fun fishing, in my opinion. Alright, so now that I have that part of the thorax dubbed up, I'll go in and put my second set of wings in. Same way as before. Trickiest part of this fly is just trying to keep those wings separate. Yeah, we'll just work on getting that tied in. Now that it is, you can go back to working on that dubbing for the rest of the thorax. But like I said, yeah, I was pretty successful with this fly on that outing for grayling. I'll probably put some pictures up here to fill in all of this boring dubbing stuff. And then I was able to catch a few trout on that fly as well over the summer, but that was definitely the most successful. This lake I was at, still kind of in the experimental phase for having the grayling in there. They've stocked it, I'm not sure how many times, but from what I can tell, they stock it every 4 years about. And the state of Montana claims that they believe that there's been some successful recruitment out of those fish, which I was happy to see some signs of that myself when I was out there fishing. At first, I was pretty skeptical because all the first, I don't know, 12 or so fish that I caught were pretty much exactly the same length, exactly the same width. They all were kind of anemic. They were pretty skinny fish. And I think that kind of played towards how opportunistic they were on this day. But moved spots a few times and actually did end up finding some smaller fish, like those cookie cutter fish that I'm sure were the last stalkers a few years ago. They were all like right in the 12 to like 13 and a half inch range. But then on that last spot I went to, I did hook into and catch a few real small, like, 5 inch fish, which to me would suggest that they have been successful in spawning in this lake. Because it had been so many years that I don't foresee any of those fish from that last stocking still being, in the 5-inch range. I think if they were that starved for nutrients, they would have probably died, a couple years ago. So that's pretty exciting. That's pretty cool, I think. That's Montana, I believe, is one of the only states that in the lower 48 that grayling are native to, that they're still in. I know that they're native to Montana, maybe perhaps Idaho, I'm not sure. But they're definitely native to Montana, and they're still here. And one of the other states that I think I've heard of is Michigan. But then, of course, they're no longer any wild populations in Michigan, I don't believe. So I get that second wing in, and then this is where I bring that hair from the back over. It looks like I got some short stuff in there. I'm just gonna end up trimming that out, I think. So this can be one of those tricky parts of the fly where everything wants to be in the way. So bear with me here while I try to get this situated. So there, I like to get a couple loose wraps in. It'll hold everything out of the way and cinch it down. Then just a couple wraps behind it, then go up in front. And we'll get a quick whip finish in there. Alrighty, so finish this fly off. Damselflies tend to have these big buggy eyes, and so I'll just leave this fly with almost a elk hair caddis type of head. I'll leave a big bulbous head of those hairs. I'll go in behind and just pluck out all these shorter hairs that didn't quite make it over the back. Just kind of clean everything up. Alrighty, and then lastly, I grab all these wings, I pull them straight up, and I cut them at a downward angle. Basically, the idea with that is that front wing on the naturals tends to be a little bit longer than the rear wing. But yeah, that's it. Real simple, pretty fun fly, real floaty, and real fun to watch those trout and, like I was saying, grayling really attack it on the surface. Big fly, so usually some pretty aggressive eats. But yeah, hope you guys liked it. Thanks for watching.